Welcome to the Laredo Public Library's NASA at My Library STEM Career Series. My name is Analisa Perez Gomez, and I am the librarian and branch manager at the McKendrick Ochoa Salinas Branch Library. Following our summer theme, Imagine Your Story, we ask you to continue using your imagination to build a future for yourself. Each session in the series will feature someone who has an exciting and challenging career in the science, technology, engineering, or mathematics fields. Today, I'd like to thank Ms. Patricia Moore for being with us. She is the communication strategist and museum liaison for NASA's Deep Space Exploration Systems. She is also part of NASA's Artemis team, which aims to land the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024. So the format of this session is Patricia Moore will start with a presentation, and then our librarian, Danielle Burns, will conduct an interview. We ask our teen volunteers to please remain on mute, but feel free to post your questions in the chat box, and we'll address those towards the end of the hour. Also, if you're accruing community service hours, please type in your full name in the chat box for attendance service purposes. We hope you enjoyed this session, and now, Miss Patricia, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction. And I'm so pleased and excited to talk with you guys today about careers at NASA and specifically NASA's Artemis program, which is our new human lunar exploration program to return humans to the moon. So I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about myself. I am one of those people that people at NASA consider the untraditional NASA employee. So we've got STEM employees that are science and technology, engineering, and math type careers. And then we also have all of the arts careers and other types of things at NASA too. So communication, I work in the communication office. So we have folks that do public affairs, communication, video editing, graphic design, virtual reality, and app creators. I mean, so there's a whole communication field. There's lawyers and business people that handle all the accounting and money, people that have management backgrounds that help manage programs. You have teachers, the SWAT team. I mean, really, there's just about any kind of career you can think of. You can find those at different NASA centers. And so my story is a little unique. I was telling folks at the beginning that I had no interest in NASA or space when I was in college. I wanted to be a teacher. And I thought, hey, I got lucky enough someone told me they were hiring at Space Center Houston, which is our visitor center for NASA. So it's like a museum, and they were hiring folks to teach kids about space. And I thought that would be a great job to have in college, right? If I want to be a teacher. Well, I didn't know anything about space, really. I took very few science classes in college because I was more interested in singing and more interested in music. And I fell in love with it. And I had a great time. They taught me everything I needed to know. I met my husband there. And this is a picture of me. I think it was either 19 or 20 years old. And I finished school and got my degree in education. And I stayed and worked in their education office, managing programs and working with the public for almost 10 years. And so I stayed there for quite a while. And then I got the opportunity to come and work at NASA's Johnson Space Center and be on camera and do live science lessons and special guest appearances, either with students in schools, museums, and then occasionally I even got to be on NASA TV, which is really cool. And part of that job was to interact with our engineers and scientists and astronauts and help tell their story about what they're working on with NASA. So here's a picture of me with the Deep Space Habitat, which is an analog or a mock habitat that could be on Mars. And I got to work with Alvin Drew, who's the astronaut that's standing next to me. I got to fly in the reduced gravity plane and create videos for NASA that taught Newton's laws of motion, and that was super cool. Somebody's drawn all over my pictures. You're pointing out my floating hair, right? So I think that will probably be the highlight of my NASA career, is getting to float. Now, this isn't in space. This is an airplane that does like a nosedive, and it goes up and then it goes down, kind of like a roller coaster. And while you're going down, you get to free fall for about 20 seconds and float. And so I'm in the plane here with a bunch of teachers as they're doing experiments with their students on the ground. And so I did that in education for about 5 years at NASA. And then about five or 6 years ago, I transitioned to a new role where I left the education world and moved over to communication. And what's really great about NASA is you may have a degree in something or a background in something, but they're really willing to let you explore and change and try new things. And so I left the world of education and moved over into public affairs and outreach, which is similar in some ways. And there's the Orion spacecraft behind me, and I'm doing more virtual events, talking with museums all over the United States. So I do virtual events a lot, but I also spend a lot of time traveling and doing in-person events for NASA. So who would have ever thought you could do that for NASA, right? Go around the country and talk about NASA's story. There are jobs like that. All right, so let's talk about Artemis. So like I said earlier, Artemis is NASA's new lunar exploration program with humans. And what makes this program different than Apollo is many things. But the most important thing to me is that we're bringing women to the moon along with our male astronauts. During the 60s and 70s, women were not allowed to be astronauts. It was even hard for them to be engineers. If you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, you get a pretty good idea of how difficult it was for women to be taken seriously and to have engineering and science type jobs during the beginning of the space program. But now women, of course, have the same opportunities as men, and we have many female astronauts, and we're going to fly some of those female astronauts along with our men to the moon in 2024. And that's one of the reasons we named it Artemis. In Greek mythology, Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo, so it's just a perfect name for our new program that includes women and men. Now, we're returning to the moon for lots of different reasons. Depending on who you ask and what their background is, you get a different answer. So the top part of this chart is what all of your planetary scientists would say, and your astronomy type people at NASA. So the moon is a great place to learn about our solar system, our sun, and about volatiles, the cycle of water, even on the moon, because we know that there's water on the moon. So there are lots of exciting things for scientists to explore. And then if you were to ask a lot of the folks that I work with that are on the human spaceflight side, it's a great place to test and practice for Mars missions. Mars is really far away, and the moon is only a few days away instead of months. And so we can practice our habitats, set up our spacesuits, all of our equipment and designs, and spend lots of time on the moon to prepare for our Mars missions. Now, when we return to the moon, we're going to go to the South Pole. So the South Pole region of the moon is unique because there are craters, just like that Shackleton crater there, that are permanently shadowed, which means sunlight never gets inside of parts of those craters. So there's water ice inside that's never been melted. And so we want to travel to the South Pole because of the water ice. But also, if you look at the edges of the crater, you see how bright they are right there. Just like on our poles on Earth, there are times of the year where it's always sunlight. So in Alaska, if you were to go up to Alaska this time of year, the sun never sets. It stays light all night. Even in the nighttime, there's still some sun in the sky. And so we want to be able to have as much sunlight as possible to keep our solar panels and our equipment running. And so the South Pole is a great place to explore. Now, when you're planning missions to space, it's a lot like, planning a camping excursion. Depending on how long you're going to be gone, you take supplies with you. If you're doing, remote camping and you really roughing it, you probably won't be near like a store, right? And so you're going to have to take everything with you. Now, imagine traveling to space. You don't have easy access to stores. You don't have easy access to oxygen or water or just basic resources. And so the farther away you go, the more difficult it gets. When we go to the space station, which is in low Earth orbit, we have lots of rockets and spacecrafts to choose from. The space station's only 250 miles away from Earth. It's not that far. And it's really easy. I mean, it's difficult, but in the grand scheme of things, it's very easy to get there compared to sending people to the moon and Mars. When you go to the moon and Mars, we don't even have a rocket in existence that can take people there safely and can carry all the supplies that we need. And so we have to build one. And that's what we're doing. We're building a rocket called the Space Launch System rocket, and it will be the most powerful rocket ever built. You can kind of look at it and maybe you recognize some of the pieces. You'll see that the boosters and even the color of the tank and the engines are similar to what we used during the space shuttle program. And then you would be right. We had parts left over when that program was retired, and we were able to utilize those and create a new vehicle. And it's similar to the Saturn V in that it has enough power to get away from Earth's gravity. You got to have a really powerful rocket to get away from Earth's gravity. And so the Space Launch System is our rocket that we will use to send humans to the moon and onto Mars. Now, it's almost finished. The boosters are already at Kennedy Space Center. Those are the white things on the side. And this is the core stage. It's sitting at Stennis Space Center in Mississippi and will be tested throughout the fall. And we'll have one big test at the end of the year where we light all 4 of those engines at the same time, strap it to that test stand, and test all of the systems together. And so once that, what we call the green run test, is finished, then that tank will also go to Kennedy Space Center and we'll start assembling the rocket. Now, the Orion spacecraft is where the people sit, right? The astronauts will ride inside of Orion, and Orion goes at the top of the rocket. Orion can sit or can fit 4 astronauts. It can be a really, really small female astronaut or a really, really tall male astronaut. So there's no size or height requirement. We can fit all sizes or all height of astronauts. And 4 will be inside instead of 3 like Apollo. It's about 30% larger. The service module, which is the part with the solar arrays, that gives us power and for our spacecraft, and it's built by the European Space Agency. So we have our first international partnerships with Artemis. And then the top part is the launch abort system, and that yanks the spacecraft away during launch if there's an emergency and we want our astronauts away from an explosion. Now, the Orion for Artemis 1 is already finished, and it's sitting at Kennedy Space Center, and we're waiting for the remaining pieces of the rocket, and then we'll start assembling it vertically inside this giant building called the Vehicle Assembly Building. So this building is massive, okay? And we can build a rocket standing straight up, and then we can drive that rocket right out to the launch pad. And that's what the mobile launcher does. We assemble and we build a rocket on that mobile launcher, and then we drive it out 1 mile an hour all the way out to the launch pad by the water. And then when it's time for launch, we'll have it there and everything we need is ready to go. When the Orion comes home, it splashes down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of California, and then we'll bring it back in and we can reuse most of the pieces that are inside. So all the avionics, the wiring, the seats, control systems, all that stuff can be reused. Now, Artemis 1 is our first mission, and for whatever reason, my video isn't playing. I don't know why, so I'll just tell you a little bit about Artemis 1 instead of showing you the video. So Artemis 1 is the first time we're going to launch the 2 vehicles together, the Space Launch System and the Orion, and we're going to test it in about 1 year. So at the end of 2021, the fall of 2021, we'll have our first test of Artemis 1, and it'll go orbit around the moon, and it'll come back. Now, Artemis 2 is the first time we put crew on board. So the crew will launch about a year after Artemis 1. So we hope like 2022, maybe early 2023. And we'll have 4 astronauts inside of Orion, and they'll go to the moon and orbit and come back. Just like we did with Apollo, we send astronauts first to orbit the moon to test out the spacecraft to make sure it's safe before we send our Artemis 3 mission to the surface of the moon. And Artemis 3 is scheduled for 2024. That's our goal. And we'll have a new lander that will land on the surface of the moon with our astronauts. And then our Orion spacecraft will bring them back home. Now, landers are really cool. You think about the big orange lander that we used during the Apollo missions. Well, the landers that NASA is working on right now are very cool. And NASA's not building them alone. We're working with 3 different companies to come up with ideas on different landers for this, to send astronauts to the surface. And these 3 companies won an award. So NASA has many contractors, and these teams all competed to win 1 of 3 spots, or 3 out of 3 spots for landers. And NASA will choose one of these companies to build the first lander for the 2024 mission, and then maybe we'll use the other landers later on. But I'm sure you recognize some of the names like SpaceX and Dynetics and Blue Origin, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. These are all some of these space companies have been around a long time, and some of them are fairly new, like SpaceX and Blue Origin. Now, in order to stay around the moon permanently, right, we want to go and we want to stay. We don't just want to visit a few times and then move on. We're going to build a spaceship that orbits the moon that is there all the time. And it can be crewed with people, or it can be uninhabited, and it still would work just great. And this would be a place for the Orion spacecraft to come and dock to the gateway, and then from there they can get inside their lander and go to the surface. So it's kind of like a space station, but not nearly as big as the one we have around Earth. That one's like the size of a football field. It's huge. But this one would be very small, only a few pieces. And this would allow us access to all points of the moon, so we can explore not just the South Pole, but the special orbit that it's in will allow us to access the North Pole, South Pole, and even the equatorial regions of of the moon. Now, this gateway is not going to be just a NASA spacecraft or a NASA spaceship. We already have support from Russia, Japan, the Europeans, and Canada to help us build and have missions to the gateway. And these are all of our same partners that partner with us on the International Space Station. So we're taking that same model of international cooperation around Earth orbit and headed out, and we're going to take them out with us to the moon. Now, we want to live on the moon longer and longer each time we visit. So that first visit in 2024 will be several hours to the surface. Then the next mission the year later, maybe days, and then weeks, and then months. And then our goal is to have astronauts living on the surface of the moon for a year before we go to Mars. And so that moon is a great place to test out all of those things I mentioned before we send astronauts to Mars. Mars is 39 million miles away at the least, right? And there are times when Mars is even farther away from Earth. And so we want to make sure that this is not a one-way trip. NASA is not sending astronauts on a one-way trip to Mars. We're going to send astronauts to Mars, and then we're going to bring them home. And we're not going to have a mission to Mars unless we're very confident that we can achieve that goal. Now, one of you may be those Martian astronauts, right? You could be an Artemis astronaut that goes to the moon, or maybe you're a Martian astronaut. And if you were to look up at the Martian sky at night, this is what Earth would look like. A tiny little blue dot in the sky. And it's because you're millions and millions of miles away from home. So it kind of puts it in perspective just how challenging these missions will be, and in how important practice missions on the moon will be to help us prepare for Mars. All right, so that wraps up my talk about Artemis. So let's talk about careers real quickly, and then you guys can ask me any questions that you want. So NASA has lots of different kinds of jobs, and I mentioned a few earlier, but the best way to start a NASA career is to come in as a NASA intern. And you can Google NASA interns, and they'll take you straight to their main page. And they have 3 different times of the year that they take students. They have, just like in college, you have summer semester programs, you have fall, and you have spring. So they take students in those 3 times of the year. The spring and the fall are better times to do internships because they're longer and you get to do cooler things. The summer is really shortened and limited, but you can go on and apply. You don't necessarily have to have a STEM background or STEM interests. Like I said, there are communications and business and law and accounting opportunities to come in as well. But the majority of the internships do have to do with science and math and engineering. So check that out. And if you have any questions specifically about internships, you can ask me in a bit. But some other types of cool jobs that you may not have thought of are astronaut trainers. Our astronaut trainers could be divers that have diving license or military experience working, with Navy SEALs. We have some Navy SEALs that work there, and they help train astronauts underwater in our neutral buoyancy laboratory. There are also all kinds of astronaut trainers because they have to know, somebody has to train them on how to go to the bathroom. Somebody has to train them on how to eat, how to give and take medicine, how to do IVs and shots. So there's a medical team too. So lots of different astronaut trainers. There are people that are more hands-on and that are building things like welding and putting the pieces of the spacecrafts together. And those folks, you when you think of welding, you may not think, oh, that's not a lot of money. Oh my gosh, these welders make a lot of money. So try to think outside the box. Going to school and getting an engineering degree is great. You can also go into trade school and get experience in welding. And that's how a lot of these men and women start off. They start with a basic welding, certificate and trade skill, and they work their way up. And now they're making like 3 times as much money as I ever will welding spacecraft. So there's lots of really cool things, hands-on things you can do at NASA too. And then you have food scientists. If you want to be a chef, well, NASA has chefs that work and they put food together for the astronauts in space and come up with ways to make it last longer and have a longer shelf life. Then you have you have scientists and engineers that are focused on materials and what are the best materials to use in space. And let's build some spacesuits with these new materials. Then you have geology and, so there's robotics. There's just so many different areas of interest. And I would love for you to ask me questions about any of that or anything else you have in mind. So with that, I will be quiet and give you guys a chance to talk to me.
So thank you for that. That was awesome information. We already have a lot of questions from our group. So I'm going to get started with that. If you don't mind, Danielle,
Sure.
We're going to start with the team questions. And the first one who put something in the chat box was Fernando. Fernando, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hello? How long does it take to build a rocket?
How long does it take to build a rocket? That's a tricky question. If you say from the design, the very beginning, the design process to the end, you're looking at easily 10 years or maybe more. And that would be for a spacecraft or even like a robot like Curiosity or Perseverance, 7 to 10 years from the beginning of the design work to the final product. Now, once the SLS is first launched in a year, we'll already have the design work done and we've tested everything. So from there, you should be able to build a new rocket every year to a year and a half at the most. So once all that design and testing is finished, then the production gets going and it doesn't take quite as long. Great question.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Amanda. Amanda, did you want to, it says Amanda on the screen. You can go ahead and let us know what your name is, and then you can ask the question.
And can you play basketball on Mars?
Well, sure, why not? You can play any sport you want. Now, you would have to adjust probably some of the rules and your expectations because Mars's gravity is about a third of what ours is. So it's a much smaller planet, and so you're going to be able to jump higher and be able to run faster, although it's going to be kind of hard to do in a spacesuit. But yeah, you could. And there's been astronauts. There was an astronaut that went to the moon that played golf. He took a tool and kind of unfolded it and then had a ball and he hit a golf ball on the moon, you know, and the moon has 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. So, I mean, you would even be able to jump higher even on the moon compared to Mars. So sure, I'm sure that once we send astronauts to the moon and Mars, once they're done with their serious science and exploration, that they'll definitely figure out a way to have some fun and to share that video and that experience with us.
That's awesome. I think we could all be like a Michael Jordan, right?
Yes, we could.
Great. Let's see. The next question is from Christina.
Oh, it's because a few days ago or weeks ago, I saw on CNN that they had finished designing the spacesuits.
Yeah, do you want to see? I have a really cool video I can kind of talk over and show you. So they're not completely finished, but they are moving along and doing a really great job at it. Let me stop. I don't need to listen to this sound while I'm doing this. All right, so let me share the screen so you guys can see. So I'll talk over this little video as it plays. All right, so of course this is an animation of what it would look like as they're walking on the moon, and then I'll show you what the real spacesuit looks like in a minute. But you see how hard it is to move around? We really want to change how difficult it was for the astronauts to move around in the Apollo suit. And now we've got the XCMU, and this is our first major prototype of our new moon suit, okay? And we could even use this suit for Mars too. So this woman, Amy Ross, has been working on suits since she's probably been in college. She's worked at NASA a very long time, and she's an amazing engineer. And she's in charge of the team that puts together these new suits. And her dad was actually an astronaut, and she designed the space gloves that her dad wore on his missions, you know, so it became a family affair. But here you can see how small she is. She's I'm 5'4", you know, so astronauts don't have to be tall. This spacesuit is going to be designed for a woman who is maybe a smaller build, and then can also be designed and customized for a man who may be taller. This prototype right here has hard pieces. You can see that there's hard plastic pieces, and then there's also soft pieces. And so some of the things we have to be careful with is what happens if you fall and you hit a rock and it tears. There's lots of really sharp, jagged rocks on the moon and also on Mars. And so that's one of the things we have to be careful with. And so some areas may be tougher with maybe harder materials, and then there may be other areas that have soft materials. It's a great question.
That's an awesome question. And it got me thinking, if we had a project here at the library to build, you know, like a replica of that, is that possible? Or is it the materials are so advanced that we could never get hold of?
So if you want to build one that looks like it, I know there are companies that do that, and they're like $50,000 to build. Yeah, but you can, but on that, I have seen lots of museums have what they call a spacesuit fashion show. So you have the students create their own spacesuit out of materials at home, and then they have a fashion show where they walk down the runway, and then they get to stand at a microphone and talk about the different pieces and why they have a soft piece here and why there's maybe a hard piece here, and here's your control module, and this is how I'll move around, and this is where I keep the oxygen. So there are things you can do to make it fun, but those even like the mock prototypes that our museums use for outreach that aren't even real, they're really expensive.
Okay, so and JP says aluminum foil over a cardboard box. That's a good.
There you go. I mean, that's what the spacesuit fashion shows are like, and I've seen lots of places do them, and they're super fun. You can use, and you could say that aluminum foil is like Mylar. And you need to do some investigation on different materials, and that Mylar also helps insulate. So you think about those blankets that are in first aid kits that you unfold that kind of look like foil. That's Mylar, and we use those inside the spacesuits to insulate them so the astronauts don't get cold. So first you do some research on the kinds of materials, and then you talk about the materials that you chose, and you just do your best to find something at home that looks similar.
Thank you for that. The next question is from Andrea. She might have had some trouble. Oh no, she's there.
She's there. She just needs to unmute. Do you want to ask, Andrea?
Can you visit other planets other than Mars?
Oh, that's a great question. So did you know that humans have only been to Earth and Moon? That's the only two places we've ever sent humans. Now, we've sent robots all over the solar system to every planet. And NASA would like to explore with humans beyond the Moon and then to Mars. And then there's even talk about other missions to the moons of the gas giants. So there's a moon called Europa that orbits Jupiter, and there's another moon called Titan that orbits Saturn. And those two moons probably would be next on the list because they are more like Earth's atmosphere or have a greater chance of having water or life than any of the other moons or planets. I think it's going to be a long time from now. Maybe in your lifetime, towards the end of your lifetime, you may see humans exploring beyond Mars and going to other places. But think about how long it takes to get to Jupiter. You're talking like 6 or 7 years. Okay, it's pretty far. And so that's a really long mission. But I do believe that we'll get to the point where you have astronauts on spacecrafts that are flying through the solar system and visiting other places. But I don't know if that will be in our lifetime.
Thanks for that question. Let's see. The next one. Oh, Gianni has several questions. So Gianni.
All right, Gianni.
Hi. My first question is, are you planning on making space traveling to people or just SpaceX?
That's a great question. So she asks, are regular people like us going to be able to go into space? And the answer is yes, but NASA won't be doing that. So NASA is a government agency. So just like you have the EPA and you have the Drug Administration, you have the military, we are part of the federal government, and our money comes from your parents, the people who pay taxes. So NASA runs government programs, and we explore, but we also help get companies ready to go out on their own. And that's how it started off with SpaceX. Is a lot of their money started off with government contracts, and we told SpaceX, we need you to build us a rocket and a spacecraft to get us, our astronauts to the moon, and we're going to pay you to do that. And so the government will pay them to do that. And while they're developing that, then they can then take that same rocket and spacecraft and sell tickets to people who have lots of money to go into space for fun. And so I think you'll see people who have lots of money go into space first. I don't know if we'll be lucky enough to have the prices down to where an average person in the United States or the world could afford it. But hopefully that will happen. And the more common going into space becomes, the cheaper it will be. Just like anything, just like the iPhones, when they first came out, they were so expensive and nobody but the really, really rich people could afford them. And then it became a very common thing to have. And now more people can afford an iPhone. So cross your fingers and hope that will happen to you, but I don't think it'll happen to me.
Thank you. Also, can you give me more information on the internships, please? It's my dream to work at NASA. I want to become an engineer. I love math, everything. Please.
Yeah. So what kind of do you know what kind of engineering you like? Then there's like mechanical, there's computer engineers. electrical engineers. Have you done some research to figure out kind of what you like?
Aerospace and robotics.
Aerospace and robotics. Okay, perfect. So my advice to you, are you in middle school or high school?
High school.
High school. Okay. So hopefully in your community, there is a robotics team. So is there one at your high school?
Yes, I'm the treasurer.
Oh, wow. You're already doing all the right things. So in high school, keep taking your math and science classes. Take every elective that you can that would work good, that would help an engineer. Do your robotics competitions and programs after school. So you're doing all the right things. And then when you get into college and you start taking your engineering classes, go ahead and start looking at clubs and programs you can be a part of in college. Because when you apply for an internship at NASA and the recruiters are looking not just that you have like a B average. I think like they're wanting folks to have like a B average, a 3.0 or higher, but they also want to see what you're involved with in school and what clubs and organizations you're involved with. That's really important. And so you apply to be an intern just like you would apply to work, at a company or, at a fast food place. There's an application you have to fill out and you let them know what you're interested in. So if you're interested in robotics, you put in your interest, and the way it works with NASA is they try to pair your interest with a mentor or a group at NASA that needs that intern with that talent. And so it's unusual for freshmen in college to get internships at NASA. It's not impossible, but it's not as common. But most of the internships start your sophomore year. So start applying your freshman year and apply each cycle. And you can go on to the website, just Google NASA interns, and somebody, maybe your parents or someone at the library or your school, can kind of help you with your application and kind of help you show how to fill it out and talk about yourself and brag about yourself. This is your chance to brag about yourself and all the cool things that you do and all the great things that you do. And then keep applying each cycle and don't give up, because they will want to have just as many girls as they do men, and they want to make sure that they're inclusive and they hire all types of people from all over the place in the United States. And so there are special grants even for Latinas and for with NASA, and there's special opportunities that go through that area too. So yeah, you've got a lot of great possibilities, but apply each cycle. And there's 3 a year, and I bet you'll get in, especially if you're already doing robotics in high school now.
Thank you. Is there anything I could do in high school?
I don't. Maybe and maybe not. So each year NASA has different programs for students. And at one time in Houston, that's far away from you, I know, we had a high school internship program, but then we don't anymore. But I would keep with your robotics teams, and I'll do a quick search after we're done to see what opportunities high school kids have. But most of the time it's more focused on like challenges or curriculum that your teachers can do with you in your classrooms. But most of the in-person opportunities don't happen until college.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Lots of great questions are coming in. I'm so proud of you guys. Let's see. The next one is coming from Scotty, who's sitting there with his sisters, Destiny and Marisa.
How long would it take to get to Neptune and back?
Ooh, those are always the hard questions for me. So it took about 11 years, or no, it was 9 years. 9 years to get to Pluto. And it's about 6 years to get to Jupiter. So sometime in between there. I don't know exactly. So somewhere between 6 to 9 years, because Jupiter is about 6 years away. And then I know Pluto is 9 years away. So somewhere in between there. How's that for an answer?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see. The next one is from Rafael. It's about oxygen. Rafa?
While you're over there, what if you ever need like an oxygen refill?
So what happens if we run out of oxygen? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes, like let's say you're living over there and you run out of oxygen, like, or you're close to losing oxygen.
Yeah, that would be a bad day if we ran out of oxygen. So, so on this base station, and I know this will work the same way on the Orion spacecraft and even on moon bases, we have a recycling system. And the one on the space station is pretty sophisticated, and it may not, we may have simpler ones for Orion since it's a small spacecraft, but it recycles the air. And it scrubs the carbon dioxide out of the air so that we can continue using the oxygen that's inside the spacecraft and just circulate it and clean it and then use it over and over again. So we would use something similar for the moon, but we always carry extra tanks and supplies of oxygen in case something were to happen. But we would definitely use some sort of, we call it like the environmental control system, or ECLS is what it's called on the space station, that scrubs and recycles our air, and it even recycles the water. So you go to the bathroom, number one, urine in space and on the space station, it recycles your urine into drinking water that can be used. And so we recycle your sweat that floats around, or if it comes off your body, the moisture in the air, the humidity, your spit, all of that is recycled through the environmental control station on the space station. The one on Orion will not be that fancy because they're not going to be in it that long, only a matter of days to get to and from the moon, no more than 2 weeks. But when we have a moon base on the surface, we'll need a system that's very similar to what we use on the space station. It's a great question.
Okay, great. Fernando has a question. This is actually Rafa's brother about Pluto. Fernando?
If NASA agreed to it, how long would it take for to send some astronauts up to Pluto and have a look around?
Oh, so in 2015, we sent New Horizons, which was the first spacecraft that went directly to Pluto and nowhere else. And we got our first really great pictures of Pluto and its moons. And it took about 9 years? About 9 years, I think. 9 years to get there. Pluto's really far away. Our solar system is really big. And just going to Mars takes at least 9 months, maybe more, and Mars is about 39 million miles away on a good day. And so it's really big. It's hard to kind of wrap your brain around how big just our solar system is. And then of course there's tons and hundreds and thousands of other galaxies and solar systems out there too.
So the term short term doesn't apply in NASA.
And so it's short term. There's not a plan to send people to Pluto. Is that your question?
No, what I'm saying is short term doesn't exist in NASA.
Short term? Is that like
the words short term? Like nobody ever says it.
Oh, no, probably not. Everyone's always looking ahead. And to be honest, to be fair, why would we think about sending people that far away when we haven't even had people live on the moon for since 1972? And even then, they were there for a short amount of time. So we've got a long road ahead of us. But I see a great future and in many years to come where we are exploring the solar system, and people can, buy a ticket to space just like you would buy a ticket on an airplane. I don't know if we're going to be lucky enough to see that while we're alive, but maybe our grandkids or our great grandkids will be a part of that generation that get to experience space that way.
Thanks again for that question. So now we have Camden. Camden, would you like to unmute yourself?
If we ever go to any other planets in the solar system, and if we find another living thing like a UFO or anything, will we bring it back to Earth and like experiment on it, or will we just just take photos of it and just guess how it lives, theorize?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and there are lots of people that have lots of opinions on that. So right now, if we were to find life on Mars, we wouldn't be bringing it back. First of all, we don't have that capability yet to even bring anything back. Everything stays on Mars. When we would go, NASA has very strict rules about not contaminating its environment, and then we don't want it contaminating our environment either. You've seen all the movies where some alien life form, is like a disease and it kills the astronauts and they go all nuts in the movie. We don't want that to happen, although I never think that would happen. But we do want to study it in its environment. And NASA doesn't want to kill it, doesn't want to experiment on it. We want to observe, right? And maybe one day we can get to the point where we would think it would be safe enough to bring something like that home. But my gut says we wouldn't my gut says that wouldn't happen for a long time. That if we have a base on Mars, then those astronauts and those scientists would be studying Mars and not necessarily bringing it back. But finding life on Mars is possible. And we hope that we do, or at least find evidence of life, but we're not going to find like an alien, like a little green man or something running around on the surface. It would be microbial, which means we probably wouldn't see it with our eyes. It would be something that would be only seen under a microscope.
Thanks. Okay, the next one is Natalia.
You're muted, Natalia.
She might be, oh, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Who leads NASA?
Who leads NASA? So NASA is a part of the government. So our ultimate boss is the president, right? And Congress signs the checks and gives NASA the money. But the president also appoints an administrator. And it's considered a political appointee. So he or she changes depending on who the president is. And so we've had lots of bosses of NASA because we've had lots of presidents, right? And so right now our administrator, his name is Jim Bridenstine, and he was used to be in the military, and he also served in Congress, and he's from Oklahoma. So so he's our administrator right now. And then, like I said, our NASA's ultimate boss, because we're part of the government, is the president. Good question.
Great. So Fernando actually had, I think, a follow-up on that. Did you still want to ask that question, Fernando?
Not really.
Not really.
And it was very similar.
Yeah, it was similar. And we have different, so the administrator is the political appointee and changes, but most of the other people at NASA don't. You know, they stay and they work there. They don't leave every time we get a new president. It would be just like any other job. You can change within NASA and change jobs if you want, or you could leave and work somewhere else. But we do have a handful of what we call political appointees that are appointed by the president, and every government agency has those political appointees. And so the great thing about it is NASA's goal is to continue to explore and to go to the moon and go to Mars and to do great things. And it doesn't matter who the president is, you know, or who the next one is, or if we have the same one, you know, those objectives still stay the same. And the people that work on all of those programs, for the most part, stay the same. And so that helps us keep momentum and keep things moving towards our goals.
And Natalia had a second question about what animals have been up in space.
Oh, I love this question. So the first animal to go into space was a dog, and it was sent by the Soviet Union, it's now called Russia. And Laika didn't make it. Her spacecraft depressurized, which means she lost all of her air and she died. And that was the first time a living organism had been in space. And that was a long time ago, like in late 50s, early 60s. And then the United States sent a chimpanzee in a spacecraft. His name was Ham, and Ham came back and lived a long life, that wonderful, happy chimpanzee. And that was our first time, the United States' first time to send a living organism to space. And since then, on our space shuttle program, we've sent several small animals, and on the space station, we've done the same thing. So I've seen, and you can Google these too, it's pretty fun. You can watch spiders build webs on the space station. You can watch caterpillars turn into butterflies. We've had mice on the space station. We've had frogs on the space shuttle, worms. So it's been really small animals, not big. And those animals stay on the space station until they die. And then, and then that's it. So we don't like have pets. Once they live out their life expectancy and they pass on, then that concludes the science that we've done with those animals. But they have a happy life, and it's fun to watch them adapt. Humans have to adapt when we go into space, right? Our body changes a lot, and it's hard at first. And so been really interesting to scientists to watch how animals adapt, and how do they create habitats? How do they eat? How do they, continue their life cycle in microgravity while they're floating?
So I have a chihuahua that's really interested in space travel. How did she get selected?
You know what? I have a chiweenie. Maybe they can go together. So it's a weenie dog mixed with a chihuahua. They'd be feisty little astronauts, wouldn't they? I think one day when you start to see people and families living on the moon and Mars, which I say is a long time from now. You will start to see the same things that we have that keep us comfortable and happy here on Earth. You'll see a lot of that on those planets one day. And what will be interesting, and what you guys may not realize, is when people start to be born on other planets, they may have to stay on that planet. Your body, when you're born, it grows up in a 1G environment. So your body is used to having gravity. If a baby is born and grows up on Mars, coming back to Earth would be really hard on that person's hard on their muscles and their bones, because your body is used to that gravity environment. And there's all kinds of movies out there about that, or TV shows that kind of hit on that when you watch, sci-fi. But that's something we'll have to think about. And if you are born and you have families that live on asteroids or another planet, that's the gravity that's similar or less than what you're born in would be fine for you. But going to a planet that has more would be really difficult.
So there's not a chance for my chihuahua then.
No, that was a long answer. I didn't really answer it. No, I don't think there's a chance for your chihuahua. The best thing to do is get it a little astronaut suit and take pictures.
Will do. I'm going to pass it on over to Miss Valentina for some questions.
Hi, what ideas or programs have been proposed for space exploration but have been rejected by NASA administrators?
I could tell you things that may have changed, but see, I'm not privy to a lot of the inside stuff. I only know what has been approved and then maybe what's been canceled. I don't know what all goes behind the scenes. I know that we've had missions to asteroids, and each time we have a president, the president can kind of help change the focus of NASA. So we've had presidents that say the focus is the moon, and then we've had presidents that say the focus is asteroids. We've had the presidents that say the focus is Mars, and so we've had different priorities, but first we got to start small, right, and work our way up to any of those big dreams. But there are programs and things that get canceled, and it could be because of money. There's just not enough money to go around to fund everything. But I really can't give you an exact example. The one that sticks into my mind most recent is the asteroid redirect program. During President Obama's administration, there was a lot of interest in sending a human mission to an asteroid instead of going to the moon. First, would send someone to an asteroid, and then there was some support and then some not support. And so that program ended up not making it because it was just easier to start planning missions to the moon first because it was closer. So that's maybe one example of something that's changed, but it wasn't because it was a bad idea. It's just we weren't ready.
So Miss Patricia, we're getting so many questions. If we don't get to all of them, how can they find out more about space?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is Google it, because if you go to the nasa.gov website, there's lots of great movies and pictures and articles to read, but they're not always kid friendly. And there is a kid version. It's called NASA Kids. You can Google NASA Kids, and then there's fun things to do. But if you have a question that's specific, just say, what are spacesuits like, or what's the new spacesuit, or how long does it take to get to Saturn? And when you're looking at your different options of websites, try to find one that has a NASA address, right? Because you want to make sure you're picking a reliable source. Space.com is another good one. They do a lot of stories on NASA, and so things that you find on space.com is a good thing to pay attention to. But I always Google it if I want to know the answer to something, and then I just try to find a NASA website in that list that answers that question.
Great, thank you for that. And also, you can talk to your friendly neighborhood librarian, and we're happy to assist you with that.
Definitely.
So we'll try to get in a few more questions for the end of the session, and we're going to move on to Miss Christina.
So you said that with your job you traveled a lot, but when you travel, what do you do? Or do you speak at places, or?
Yeah, thanks. No, nobody ever asks questions about my job. That's awesome. So I do. I get to do a little bit of a lot of things. So my job is to travel and visit museums all over the United States. And I go in and I schedule a meeting with their president or their CEO and their management team. And then I go and I do a presentation that's similar to what I showed you guys about what NASA's working on. But then I go through and show them all the different resources that we have that are free that they can use in their education programs, that they can build exhibits and that sort of thing. And then I help them brainstorm ideas on how they can include NASA's story in our programs in the things that they already do. So in their camps or in their public programs and that sort of thing. So when I travel, I've been to all 50 states except for 7. I've got 7 left to hit. And I try to hit museums in rural places, which means they're not big towns. And then I try to go and hit all the big city ones too. And then we become friends, right? Those people, we make a relationship, a face-to-face relationship, and then they email me when they need help, or if they want me to help them write something about NASA, or help them find resources to create an exhibit, or help put them in contact with engineers and scientists so they can have an expert they can interview. So I kind of act as what we call like a liaison. So I'm kind of like that person in the middle for NASA. I represent NASA for all of the museums and science centers in the United States. So it's a pretty cool job. Yeah. I've gotten to meet a lot of really neat people, and I've driven all over the place. And sometimes I take my family with me in the summertime. My kids and my husband usually come with me on my trips, and then we get a chance to explore different places. But it's kind of sad I don't get to do that right now because of everything that's going on, but we can talk virtually. And so I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now if we didn't have COVID, because I don't do very many of these events in the summer because I'm really busy traveling. So there's a plus side and a positive side to everything, right?
Thank you. Fernando has several questions. Fernando?
So if you have a time limit, like within 3 weeks, what stuff or necessities would you take from your house to another planet?
Ooh, so like what necessities would I take with me?
Yeah, like food or your refrigerator or
yeah. So I would
TV.
I would probably let NASA handle all of the things I need to keep myself alive. And then I would think about all of the fun things I could take with me. So if I could take my pet, I have 3 dogs. I wouldn't want to take all 3 of them though. I would just take one. I would want to take my family with me, pictures, video camera, ways to communicate, probably like a tablet. I love to read. And so I do a lot of reading on a Kindle, the Kindle app. And then I would think about what could I take with me that I could then give to my family when I get back. So astronauts like to take personal items that are flown in space, and then they give them to people as gifts. So I was very lucky to have an astronaut that's a friend of ours. And when he went on the space shuttle, he flew our wedding rings with him. And so I have a picture of my wedding rings floating in space. And so even though when my husband and I got married, we didn't have any money and my diamond is super small, it doesn't matter because it's been in space. Nobody could ever replace that ring with a bigger diamond because it's my little tiny wedding ring has been in space. And so that's so cool. So astronauts try to think unselfishly too about what kinds of things they could take for their friends and family to be flown to bring back. But having my dog would make me feel happy. I like having my dog with me. Not the Chihuahua, that's my kid's dog. She's crazy. I have a little white fluffy poodle mix that's like 10 pounds of just love and kisses, and I would probably take her with me.
And poodles are so smart.
They are. She is smart. She's a stinker. She's naughty though.
And so my other question is, like, based on necessities, is there electricity in space?
So that's one of the things we have to create, right? And we can't have like a wire that plugs in, down to the ground. And so what we do is we use solar energy. We use solar panels quite a bit in space. And then we have batteries that store the energy when we're not in the sunlight. Excuse me. So the space station goes around the Earth, and every 90 minutes you get a sunrise or sunset. So it's pretty cool. So while you're in the sun, your solar panels are taking in energy and it's storing it in batteries. And then when you're on the dark side of the Earth, away from the sun, those batteries power. We will probably also use nuclear energy when we go to Mars, because the sun is not as strong and powerful, and all the dust that's on Mars always gets in the way and on top of our solar panels. So we use a small amount of nuclear energy for our rovers, for Curiosity and for Perseverance. And so we'll probably use nuclear energy. But yeah, between those two, that's most likely.
So wind energy is out of the question concerning in space, right?
Yeah, there's no wind. There's solar wind. So there are solar sails, like SAILs, like a wind sail, like on a boat. If you Google, you can see concept images of using a solar sail to help power a spacecraft through space. using the solar energy waves. That's a concept. We haven't created anything like that. But and then there is wind on Mars, but it's very little. So those big windstorms you see in the movies is nothing like that. Like in The Martian, the wind can't blow the ladder and the astronaut across, across the planet. That doesn't work. It's like super small winds. So we would need something else.
So on Mars, the hurricane problem is done for?
Yeah, no hurricane problems. We do have dust storms, and they have those big dust devils that kind of look like small little tornadoes, but they're not like our tornadoes that are going to rip apart your house. The wind is much smaller, but dust storms is a pain because there's no visibility. It can be dangerous because of that, and then the dust gets into everything, which can cause all sorts of issues. And so we do have to think about the weather on Mars and how we're going to protect the astronauts from that, but we don't have to worry about it blowing away their spacecrafts or their habitats.
Just use water to wash everything. Oh, wait a second.
Yeah, there's not very much water, right? And so we would probably have a base that would be near water ice. And then we would also be bringing a lot of it with us too. So there's just so much to learn. You think about having to take everything with you to survive because there's nothing there but maybe some water ice. It's a pretty big task. And there are people at NASA, that's their only job, is to think about what humans need to survive and how much they need for however many days they're going to be there.
So thank you so much for that question, Fernando, and to all of you for all of these questions. I know you have so many more questions, and I just love that you have so much curiosity. So we'll just have to continue this conversation at a later date. But I do have one final question for you, Miss Patricia. Some of the teen volunteers have mentioned that they're not sure what they want to do yet as a career. What would you recommend to them to find that out?
Yeah, so I kind of like what Gianni was doing, and she's a part of a club, a part of a team, to get a chance to experience things. And I know the libraries have programs that are different that you can come and be a part of like this, or maybe you have a science center museum that's nearby, and just to try to get experience and exposure to different types of things to see what you're interested in. And you know what? If you don't figure it out by the time you get in college, it's okay. There are lots of people that go into college and they're not sure what they want to do yet. And that's okay. You shouldn't feel bad if you haven't figured it out by then. But just to try to get as much exposure as you can. And then eventually you'll figure out what I like. Maybe you like video games. Maybe you can make a career in creating video games. You can make good money doing that, so maybe you like music, you can go in and music and play, or maybe be a music teacher, so there's so many different things. Just figure out what is it that you like to do. And then you try to do as much of that as you can and get experiences with it, and then and keep moving forward. Because if you ask an astronaut how to be an astronaut, they'll say, find something you're passionate about and be the best at it that you can be. And if it's in that STEM career or STEM world, you could be an astronaut. There's so many different kinds of astronauts. So, and so many different jobs at NASA. So just find something you really like to do and try to do as much of it as you can. That's really my best advice. You never know what's going to happen. You could walk through a building at college and meet somebody and end up working at NASA, and you thought you were going to teach, in a classroom your whole life. You just never know. Just be open to new things and to try new things.
Thank you, Miss Patricia. It's been wonderful talking with you today. It's been a real pleasure for the Laredo Public Library as part of our NASA at My Library program to welcome you. And I hope someday we get to meet in person. I hope.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Do you have a science center in Laredo?
Well, we have a university.
Okay.
And then we have the libraries.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll add it to my list after I hit those 7 states. Maybe we could do something. But if not, I'm sure we could do virtual events again. I'm going to most likely do more of these in the fall since I'm not going to be traveling. So I have you, I have your email. I have all of the people I've been working with on a list. And so if we do something, you might not want to hear me again, but maybe I'll try to find you someone different. But yeah, so we're going to try to do some more of these in the fall since we're going to be doing lots of virtual things for the foreseeable future.
Well, yes, thank you so much. And yes, we want to continue the relationship. You are a friend of the library now, and so we want to keep you closely connected to us. Once again, thank you to everyone for being here. In order to know what's coming up at the Laredo Public Library, virtually and otherwise, you just need to go to www.laredolibrary.org and take a look at our schedule. There are so many free and interesting programs for you to register for. So having said that, I want to wish everyone a wonderful afternoon and to stay curious and to follow your passions. Okay, so thank you. And
yeah, thanks guys. You had such great questions. I had so much fun talking with you today.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.